What happens when and if the global economy loses faith in the dollar? What takes over as the global reserve currency, or what becomes the default then?
Well, first of all, before the dollar was the reserve currency, all those other currencies that you mentioned were backed by gold. I mean, they weren't just fiat. I mean, the dollar is the first currency in history to achieve that status as pure fiat currency, right? So there's no real money behind it. And so what I think is going to happen in a world where no central banks currently issue legitimate currency, right? Legitimate currency would be currency backed by gold, real money. That is the situation that the world was in before the dollar. And in fact, when the dollar originally became the world's reserve currency, it was backed by gold. In fact, it was redeemable in gold on demand. I don't think the dollar ever would have gotten that status in the first place but for the tie to gold. And dollars were basically, or Federal Reserve notes were really IOUs for dollars, and the dollars were gold. That's what the dollar was. It was a weight of gold. And so in today, where nobody is actually issuing any legitimate currency, where every central bank has just got fiat, I think that when the dollar is no longer the main reserve for all those fiat currencies, they're not just going to pick another fiat currency to replace the dollar. It wouldn't make any sense to just go to the euro or to go to the yen, because at the end of the day, they're just paper too. I think the dollar's demise is going to introduce the remonetization of gold. Not that it was ever demonetized by central banks, because central banks all hold gold to some degree. But I think gold is going to replace the dollar as the primary reserve asset for all central banks.
All right. Well, of course, some would argue that that could be replaced by Bitcoin, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. But focusing on, because I know how you feel about that, Peter, but focusing on the dollar and gold. I mean, look, if we do go back to some kind of gold standard, the US is arguably still the best position. The US still has the highest gold reserves, lays claim to nearly as much gold as the next three countries underneath it combined. Granted, we do have China as the largest producer of gold, but it's currently ranked 6th in terms of gold reserves. So if there is this scenario, soaring inflation, de-dollarization, loss of faith in the greenback, which currency is in the best position to benefit from that?
Well, I definitely don't think it's the US dollar, because the US dollar enjoys the benefit of the dollar
even with
being
all those gold
currency.
Reserves backing it? Even as being top of the list of gold reserves?
Yes, because first of all, maybe they don't even have as much gold as is claimed. I don't know when the last time there was an independent audit of Fort Knox. So the government can claim they have a certain amount of gold, you know, whether or not you want to believe them. But let's assume that they're being honest. How long will they be able to hold on to that gold? Because we're going to now have to start paying for our imports with gold, right? We have a huge trade deficit. And our trading partners, if we don't have real goods, we're going to have to ship some gold out to pay for our imports. So it's not like the gold supply is going to last very long in the world that we have now. And also the U.S. government, you know, if they're going to run deficits, where are they going to, you know, they're going to have to start spending gold. I mean, right now, all they have to do is print money. So if the government wants something, they just need to print money and they can get it. But in the new world, where gold is a reserve, if they want something, they need the gold to pay for it, right? They either have to tax the citizens and get, you know, their gold, which is, you know, backing their currency, or they're going to have to, you know, start dipping into their reserves. So the U.S. gold reserve can be depleted very quickly if we need that gold to pay for things. See, right now we don't need anything to pay for anything. America is the biggest beneficiary of the dollar standard, because let's say you take a small country, let's say you take New Zealand, right? If New Zealand wants to import, it has to export. It can't just print. The New Zealand dollar isn't the reserve currency, so it has to earn dollars in order to buy things that are dollar denominated. We don't have to earn anything, we just print them. But if we have to start earning just like everybody else, you know, the other countries, it's not going to make a difference to New Zealand whether they have to earn dollars or earn gold. They still have to earn that reserve. It only makes a difference to the United States, because now we go from printing something to earning something. and it's a lot harder to earn than to print.
All right, well, Peter, if the dollar does indeed suffer some form of a collapse, to your point, then it stands to reason that emerging markets that owe dollar-denominated debt and that have rich commodities would benefit. So do you agree with that? Do you think that emerging markets would be best positioned to benefit from a de-dollarization?
Well, absolutely. I think those markets have the most to gain by the collapse of the dollar. And I think that they have shared a disproportionate burden in supporting the dollar. Because, if Americans are living beyond their means, which they clearly are by virtue of the reserve currency and these massive deficits. So if American citizens are living beyond their means, that means citizens in other countries, by definition, must be living beneath their means to make this possible. And I think it's the emerging market consumers that are bearing the brunt of that subsidy. And so when the dollar collapses and Americans are no longer living above their means, which means Americans aren't consuming nearly as much stuff, then who's going to get to consume the stuff that Americans are now too poor to buy? I think a lot of those new consumers are going to be found in the emerging markets. So,
right. Okay, so
it's like a giant weight is lifted from their shoulders, and now they're in much better shape.